Thank you for coming back. Maybe you have some question or some comment on the first part of this morning. Does anyone has something to say? The coffee was good?
Yeah, I think there are no questions.
All right. Okay, then I have a question for you. According to you, what is the most intensive agriculture application using remote sensing? Is there anybody who has an idea? I repeat my question. What is the most intensive application in agriculture, which is operational?
Sorry, clarifying question. What do you mean by intensive? Like data intensive or intensive in terms of use and mostly used?
Both.
Uh,
Do you want to say something?
Nobody has an idea? Okay. Maybe this is the reason why you are here, or maybe you are not interested by agriculture, then I am sorry for the morning. Actually, the most intensive since decade has been the common agriculture policy. This is the larger civil application of remote sensing. Even all domain combined, in terms of civil application, the common agriculture for decades has been the most demanding application. And it used to be based on very high resolution, sampling Europe all over to the control of the agriculture declaration. You know, each farmer in Europe has to declare what they plan to do in terms of crop type, and therefore there were a control in place. This ran for decades, but most recently, the Commissioner Phil Hogan, actually in 2016, said that he want to 2018, he want to modernize the CAP to change the control by a monitoring supporting farmers. He want to replace on-farm check by satellite observation to help the farmer to do a better job. And why it is a very intensive application is the fact that, you know, the common agriculture policy is 40% of the EU total budget. Now it's a bit less, it's something like 35, but it's still a huge amount for farmers. Therefore, the Phil Hogan commissioner said that we want to make use of the Copernicus program to reform our common agriculture policy after 2020, and deal with this will start as an operational application next year in 2023. COVID delayed the reform, COVID delayed the implementation of this new common agriculture policy, and currently each country has submitted a strategic plan defining what is good for its agriculture transition in the context of the Green Deal that you know, farmer and agriculture application, agriculture and crop production today is a contributing source to emission, and in the future, it is expected to be part of the solution. Today, this is part of the problem, and after the Green Deal, it should be part of the solution, meaning that today, fertilizer way of doing intensive cropping actually provide a significant share of the emission, while in the future, we expect that agriculture will be a carbon sink because we will store carbon in the soil because the farmers are expected to change their practices. They will manage the residue in a different way. They will reduce the fertilizer, the pesticide use, and they will reduce the way they prepare the soil. This is what we call conservation agriculture or agroecology or sustainable agriculture practices and so on. And the Green Deal of the EU forced them through the common agriculture policy to go into this direction. And luckily, meanwhile, Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2 has been launched. And as Europe is in high latitude, and Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia are even in higher latitude, you can see that actually the revisit cycle is not 5 days. It's much more than that. This is it for most of Europe is 3 days for Sentinel-2, and it could be up to 2 days for Sentinel-1, while it is expected to be 6 days at the equator. Therefore, we will make use of this to support the policy. And this is a very nice story because this is the first time that the Commission define a policy according to the Earth observation capability. Of course, it's mainly according to the Green Deal objective, but also relying on the Copernicus capacity of observation. And before, it was 5% of the farmer, which was very check in detail. And this was boring the farmer, annoying the controller, annoying the European expert, and so on. Today, the change is as follows. It's no longer 5% that we will monitor, it's 100%. 100% of the whole agriculture land of Europe will be monitored continuously. And of course, we will no longer control in very detailed way the farmer. They will be assessed and monitored and support. Meaning that the idea of the reform is not to check if they have done what they do, what they claim, and to, penalize those who did not, practice what they wanted, what they declare. The idea is not to define sentences, to define penalties to the farmer who did not practice as expected. The idea is to warn the farmer on time and to tell him, hey, be careful. Right now, you are not on track to do what you plan to do. Is it your intention, or is it an accident, or is it something that we were not able to observe our satellite, but you have done that on the ground? And based on that, actually, there have been a development of a capability at European scale to monitor each parcel and each holding to be able to write to the farmer on time that maybe he will need to do something on his field if he wants to be subsidized. If he doesn't want, no problem. There will be no penalties. It will be just no subsidized. But this is a big change, a big shift in terms of common agriculture policy, because before it was really how to sanction the farmer, how to penalize the farmer who did not behave as he declared. Now is how can we help the farmer to do what he wants? And if he wants what the Green Deal wants, we subsidize his activity. And therefore, this is the purpose of what we call the Sentinel-based marker for common agriculture monitoring. And to do the job, actually, we were lucky enough to lead a big project called Sen4Cap to support all the paying agencies of Europe, including the one from the Baltic countries, to define how can we do the crop time mapping, the vegetation growing indicator, and the grassland mowing detection, and the monitoring of agricultural practice. And the purpose of this project was, okay, is it feasible? How can we do that? And let's work together to make it operational for any paying agency of Europe. And today this is ongoing. A few weeks ago, we were in a meeting with all the paying agencies to let them know how we will do that without Sentinel-1B. As you know, Sentinel-1B is a failure. Therefore, unlike previously, we have only one satellite in the SAR capability, and therefore we have to cope with this. And there is two slides which are very similar. The version 2 was delivered in 2021, and actually this is a system which is running in near real time, processing the data as they come. The satellite sends the data to the catalog, the system takes the data and process it on the way automatically. Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, but also Landsat 8 and Landsat 9. It can be run also offline. Of course, this is designed to run at national scale. We can rely on a cloud infrastructure, or you can operate it locally if you want, if like the Baltic countries or the Belgium territory are small enough that we can handle this locally. And once the data are downloaded, they are pre-processed. We can look at this. They are pre-processed, and then there are several processors which allow to do what we want for the Common Agriculture Policy. And there is a new version coming in December 2022, which need to be ready for the operational monitoring in the paying agency. And the big innovation is the fact that there is a marker database which is building along the season all the metrics derived from Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2 for each parcel. Therefore, for 40 weeks of the year, every week or every 10 days, there is up to 60 metrics which are computed for each parcel. And just to give you an idea, for Spain, there is 17 million of parcels. This gives you an idea of the size of the database. Therefore, this is something that you run along the season because you need to write to the farmer during the season, of course. It's not aftermath. It's during the season you want to write on time a letter to the farmer, which is important to let him know that the practice has not been detected as he declared. And therefore, this marker database is building really along the season. And this marker database allows to develop any new application that a given country wants to put in place. And we know that in Lithuania, they are very, very keen about grassland mowing detection, and therefore they may be develop new application related to that, and they will build on the marker database. What is important to know is this Senfocap is an open source system, and therefore you can download it for your own application, and you can use the marker database for your own development, maybe for a company or for your own application, which was not foreseen at the beginning in the Common Agriculture Policy, but which could be derived for, let's say, water management or water use efficiency and so on. Let's go into detail. Sentinel-2 reflectance and all vegetation indices are computed on the fly. Sentinel-2 biophysical variables that we mentioned before are also produced on the fly. Chlorophyll content, green area index, and all these. Sentinel-1 amplitude and the backscattering coefficient are computed on the fly, as well as Sentinel-1 coherence. We'll come to that later on, maybe. I don't know, can you tell me in the chat if you have been informed of what is the Sentinel-1 coherence signal? This is an interferometric application. This is a bit more advanced. I can introduce that briefly if you never heard about this. If you heard about this, let me know.
Pierre, so we have interferometry tomorrow. It means that they don't have the info.
Yet. But therefore, I will give the principle, and tomorrow you will have the detail. And all these marker, thank you, Amalia, all these marker will be applied to the different, let's say, scheme or application that we mentioned before: grassland mowing detection, crop time mapping, agricultural practice monitoring. A preliminary or a prerequisite for this application related to the Common Agricultural Policy is the availability of the parcel delineation. As you may know, every farmer in Europe is to declare his parcel delineation, and there is online system in most countries where the farmer will delineate for the ongoing season the different parcel he intended to grow, and he will declare the crop type. And of course, this allows you to start with a very good information to do the job. In some other country, we can say that today it seems feasible, thanks to artificial intelligence, to delineate the parcels. It has been shown and implemented as a commercial application in Australia. It was a former PhD student of mine who went there, and now there is an operation application using the ReuseNet, which is a convolutional neuronal network, which allow actually to detect the border of the parcel in a better way than most segmentation algorithms. And therefore, in Europe, the farmer has to declare the limit of their parcel, but there are tools today which comes close to what we expect for the detection of the parcel limits. And therefore, when you have the parcel, you can compute the average of the different Sentinel-2 metrics every 10 days and the different Sentinel-1 metrics every week. And this is, of course, related to what we call the land parcel information system. And we consider that the minimum field size should be 1 pixels after internal buffer of 1 pixel. Therefore, you take the boundaries, you have an internal buffer that, because you don't want to have the mixed pixel at the buffer, at the boundary level. And therefore, you still have to have 1 pixel internal of the parcel after buffering to be used when it comes to Sentinel-1, 3 pixels when it comes to Sentinel-2. And this run like this. These are 3 parcels. You have a parcel in green, a parcel in red, and parcel in blue. And this is the ongoing season with the NDVI. This is an easy case. And you can detect the harvest for the different crop. And then it continues, of course. And then there are catch crop. And you have to detect the catch crop because the farmers are not supposed to leave the soil bare. This is not so good from various point of view, for nitrogen leaching, for water runoff, for soil carbon, and therefore you want to detect first the crop type, and then you will detect the harvest, and then you continue, and you want to detect the catch crop period, and you see that the catch crop period for the upper parcel was actually done during the mandatory period. And this was the same case for the lower right parcel, but for the lower left parcels, the catch crop was implemented too late. And therefore, this was not compliant. And in the context of the new Common Agriculture Policy, there will be a letter to the farmer saying, hey guys, be careful, it seems that you planted too late. And he may reply by picture, geotag picture, saying, I planted and you have not seen it by your satellite, with your satellite. Or they may just say, okay, sorry, I will change my declaration. I claim that I will do a catch crop and I didn't. Therefore, how do we detect the harvest to make it more robust? we will not rely on NDVI only. This is not safe because if they are cloud, you will not detect the harvest. And you need to detect the harvest in any case, even in a cloudy condition. Therefore, you have the NDVI curve here in green, but you have also the Sentinel-1 ratio, VV-VH ratio, which is in the red dot. And then you have the coherence information in VV, which are the dark dot. And to detect an harvest, in this case, you have 10 markers. Actually, the 5 markers are related to the detection of harvest. You see the markers are here, and they turn as true. The M1 to M5 turn as true as the season goes. The markers are like, for instance, you need a high NDVI value to make sure that there is a crop. And then this is marker 1. And then you need a decrease of NDVI. This will be marker 2, and so on. But you need also an increase of coherence. This will be marker 4. And the combination of all markers allow you to detect the week of harvest. And then you have another set of markers which are related to the catch crop development. And these are the markers coming from marker 6 to marker 10. And this built your confidence into the level of certainty of detection. And this level of certainty is referring to the number of markers which has been turned as true. And in this case, as 10 markers has been turned as true, this is a very strong confidence. And the confidence is turned into a compliance index because of the compliance between the declaration of the farmer and the detection by the satellite. Here, as you can see, while it's running over the season, you can see the planet animation. These are planet imagery. You know, I suppose, the planet constellation. This is 200 satellites providing noisy information, but daily. And of course, it allows you to look at the planet and to do some visual interpretation to see if our system is running properly. Of course, you don't want to rely on planet and to visual interpretation to run 17 million of parcels for Spain. Therefore, this is only for the validation that we use the planet. I don't know if you got the idea, but the idea is to have several metrics coming from the satellite. Here we have 3 metrics, and there is a convergence of evidence through the markers which allow to take a decision and to define if it's compliant or not, and to have a level of confidence or uncertainty. And the confidence is very strong in this case because all the metrics, the one coming from the coherence, the one coming from the backscattering coefficient, and the one coming from the NDVI are converging. And therefore the flag is full green. What is a coherence? The coherence is actually the comparison of the phase signal from one date to the next one. This is what you will learn tomorrow in the interferometry module. You have a backscattering signal coming every time you observe with the SAR instrument. The coherence is actually the phase signal. It's not the intensity or the amplitude of the signal, it's the phase signal related to this observation. And the phase signal is not rich except if you compare it with the phase signal as soon as possible after the observation of the first one. In this case, every 6 days or every 3 days, but this is 6 days in this case, every 6 days, we are coming with the same satellite the same configuration of observation 6 days after to observe a given target. And therefore, we will use the phase information from the first observation and the phase signal of the closest observation, which is 6 days later on, because we need to use the same configuration exactly. It should be the same position of the satellite, almost the same one. There may be a shift of few hundred meters between the position of the satellite on day 1 and day 6. But if the baseline, the difference between the two positions of the satellite is very short, then we can compute the interferometric signal. And the coherence will tell you that the phase has not changed from one day to another. And the non-coherence or the low coherence tell you that the phase signal has changed. And therefore, here what we can see is the coherence is very low when the crop is very high. When you have an NDVI very high, you have a very low coherence. This is due to the height of the crop. When the crop is high, the wind will move the crop, and it will move enough to have an impact on the phase signal of the SAR sensor. And therefore, when the crop grows, you see the NDVI cycle here, the steep increase of NDVI corresponds to a decrease of the coherence, because actually there is a crop which are moving, the crop is moving with wind or with stress and so on. And therefore, the phase signal of 1 day and 6 days later are not very well correlated, and we have a very low coherence. But as soon as you harvest the crop and you cut the crop, then the NDVI goes down. This is the senescence phase. But as soon as the crop is cut, you have an increase, a rapid increase of coherence. This is what you can see in the blue part of the graph. You have an increase, a rapid increase of the coherence. This is typically because you cut the crop. Therefore, only residues remain. Therefore, the phase between the day 1 and day 6 are much more correlated, and therefore you increase the coherence value. And this signal will be used not only for the harvest detection here, but also for the mowing detection. I hope I was clear enough for the coherence information. The idea of coherence is the fact that the coherence translates the similarity of the phase signal coming from SAR instrument between two dates. And these two dates need to be close. Otherwise, there will be no phase signal at all. And therefore, this is a different crop, I believe, or this is, I'm not sure if it's, no, this is the same animation, sorry. And here is a list of the markers. I told you M1 is the presence of dense vegetation. You need high value NDVI. The M2 is you need a loss of vegetation, a break of NDVI. You need a loss of vegetation seen from the SAR. This is a break in backscatter ratio, an increase. And you need a break in the coherence value for marker 5. And this convergence of the 5 marker tell you that you are sure that you detect an harvest. And then this is for the catch crop. And you see that the harvest detection, within a week, you have a detection rate of 53 to 75%, depending on the countries. And within 2 weeks, you have between 70 to 90%. Therefore, it seems quite reliable. It's not perfect, but it's quite reliable. This is the reason why in 2019, we were able to detect for Lithuania, Netherlands, Czech, Spain, Romania, Italy, the timing of the harvest, and this is a proportion of harvested field over the season. And of course, you can see that the harvest takes place first in the, takes first in Italy, which is the green line, and in Romania, and then later on in Lithuania and in Czech Republic, and even later on with this one, which is Spain. The first one was Spain. Romania is this dark blue, and then Netherlands comes later. And these are the date of harvest for the different. I think in this case, this is all crop combined: the summer crop, the winter crop, and the spring crop. And of course, these are the proportion according to the different countries. This was a key demonstration allowing to build confidence in the Sen4CAP system, which would be able then to support the Common Agriculture Policy. A more sensitive application is the grass mowing detection, where you need to rely on Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 because there are some cloud which empower you to detect mowing activities. Why is it important? Is a farmer will get subsidized if he can prove that he did something on the parcel. If you have a grass parcel and you don't do anything, you will not get subsidized because it's not a farming activity. At least you have to mow once or to graze once to get a farm parcel. Otherwise, it will be just a natural parcel. Therefore, to do so, there is a Sentinel-1 processing chain and Sentinel-2 processing chain. And typically, the Sentinel-1 will compute the coherence and the amplitude, and then they will use the parcel delineation to compute the average of the parcel signal and to derive, to derive the parcel temporal trend of the coherence, the amplitude of VV and the amplitude of VH. Let's say the backscattering coefficient. And therefore, there is an algorithm to detect the mowing activity or the not mowing activity. What you want to avoid is a false alarm, which could be related to other effects than mowing. And we have the same with the Sentinel-2. The Sentinel-2 will actually provide NDVI, D-Vari index, and FA-par, which are average at parcel level. And then the trend analysis will allow to detect the mowing activities. You fuse the detection of Sentinel-2 with the detection of Sentinel-1, and you get confidence to develop your compliance analysis. And this will be, of course, related to the country regulation and will allow you to have an output which support the decision. Yeah, these are the steps. And let's look at one application for agriculture monitoring in terms of mowing event detection. Therefore, you have the NDVI value. This is the easy case. You have the expected curve that you can model based on temperature and rainfall. Assuming a grassland, you expect that kind of development. This is the observation. The blue dot are the observation. Therefore, you don't see this observation. Maybe it was grass, or maybe it was too flooded, and the drainage was not good, and the growing season start late. And then actually you reach to the level that you expect with your model, and then suddenly you have a drop. This is clearly a detection of mowing. And then it grows again, and then you reach again the the level which is expected for natural vegetation, and then there is another drop, and then it grows again. Therefore, here in this case, we have two detections which are corresponding to NDVI drop, where you don't expect any impact because the expected development seems to be smooth. If you look at the lower detection, this is here the actual observation of NDVI, and you have two clear drops. These are very easy that you can relate to the NDVI value. 19 July is full green, full vegetation. 26 July, the next cloud-free image is very low NDVI. Same here between these two dates. This is when it comes to NDVI, and this is what you can see here. NDVI, we are in Spain, and you see there is a drop in NDVI here. You detect the timing corresponding to the red interval. There is a mowing event during this interval. There is another mowing event here, another one, and a fourth one. The observed mowing detection on the ground are the dotted blue, and you see that this is matching quite closely the detected period. And visually from the planet, you always see this drop of vegetation from one day to another. This seems easy. It's not that easy because in Spain, you may have drought, and a drought actually may have a similar impact than a mowing. And the mowing is from green to bare soil, not bare soil, but drier vegetation and less dense vegetation. When it comes to drought, actually, you may have the similar impact. To avoid this confusion, you have to run the rainfall indicator in parallel to the satellite observation to make sure that there is no drought confusion factor during your mowing detection event. In Netherlands, it was another case where you have NDVI value here and then nothing. Because of cloud coverage, you don't know what's going on there. You have only one observation for 1 month. And then in June, you have an observation in April, an observation in May, and another one in June. Therefore, you are completely blind in this period. And then it goes easy because you have NDVI value. When you check, you detect with the red period, and the truths are corresponding to the red period, and the planet visual interpretation actually confirm what we have been detecting with NDVI. But actually, there were 4 mowing, and these 4 mowing are better seen for the same parcel here, but only for the SAR information. Here it was the NDVI for a given parcel. This is the same parcel with 4 mowing, but this time we see 4 of them and not 3 like the previous one from the optical information, because the SAR goes through the cloud, and in May you have a signal, and you can see that there is an increase of coherence which corresponds to a mowing detection. As for the harvest, you cut the grass, therefore there is a better coherence or better correlation between the phase signal for adjacent Sentinel-1 observation. And you have this increase here, an increase there, an increase there. When it's an increase, it means that the 2 dates was very consistent in terms of phase, meaning that the mowing detection took place before. And therefore, you need the increase to know that before was a mowing. An increase before was a mowing. An increase before was a mowing. And this was the case for the first mowing detection. This is, of course, a very nice case in Netherlands. In many cases, it's less clear than that. And therefore, there is a confidence value which is related to the amplitude of the signal of the coherence and the amplitude of the drop of the NDVI. Next to the mooring detection, the tillage activity is also something that you want to look at, because tillage is not what you want to maintain as an activity in long term. We look for reduced tillage activities to conserve a better biological activity in the soil, to have less leaching and less nitrogen emission in the soil. And therefore, you want to detect the tillage and the non-tillage. Tillage is easily detected when it comes like NDVI in this case. You have a very low NDVI, which is maintained related to the tillage. And this is what you can see here. Tillage took place, and therefore you have the residue here, and you have a tillage. But similarly, you can combine the SAR signal from the coherence and the backscatter ratio to detect the tillage. And again, this is a conversion of marker, which allow you to make sure that you have a tillage at that date. The coherence increase, because after tillage, you have a better coherence, but you have also the backscatter coefficient, which is high, because you increase the roughness, and therefore you increase the backscattering coefficient, and the NDVI need to drop or remain low at the tillage level. These are similar to the harvest marker, but applied to tillage, meaning that you don't need high vegetation before. You can be low vegetation and still have a detection of tillage. This is another case, but very similar, where the tillage took place at the sowing and not after the harvest. And of course, you are able to detect the tillage anytime it takes place during the season. This was so successful that during the COVID, a question came to us asking, can you monitor the fact that the Spanish farmers are able to harvest their wheat in spite of the COVID impact? COVID impact on the farmer health, but also on the supply chain of the spare part of the harvester. You know, harvesters are fragile machine, and if you break your harvester, you are not able to harvest, and probably the spare part will not come on time. This was a question which was asked, and in the context of the rapid action for coronavirus Earth observation dashboard, we monitor the harvest timing for 2020 to be compared to the 19. And as you can see here, the 2020 was a bit later than the 19, but at the end it catch up. And this was monitored for the different provinces of Spain, showing that actually everything was harvested as expected. Therefore, we could conclude that there were no impact of COVID on the harvest activities. It was a good news because this allows us to have food for the season. Is there any question regarding the agricultural practices and the common agriculture policy? Because I will stop this explanation and I would like to move to the yield estimation. Any question?
Yes, we have 3 questions.
I will try to ask a general question. So at the beginning of presentation, you showed a few graphs to detect whether the farmers have planted something after the harvest. And then also regarding the fact that you are monitoring the whole Europe, different countries, different kind of climates and so on. So what is the, let's say, general dispute, between the farmers with these results? Do you have some kind of return, let's say, information so you detect something that has been done or has not, and then do you have any information like what's the dispute maybe with the farmers, if you also relate to the fact that different kind of acquisitions and different kind, as you mentioned, climate and so on. So then it's easy maybe to say for farmers that, oh, there was clouds. How can you even see something from the space and so on? And then you also showed these markers, and markers were related also with changes, relative changes to the NDVA, for example. And in these first graphs, there was basically change in 0.1 of the index. The question is more general. Do you have any information whether farmers are disputing your results, and how do you actually process maybe these disputes, or maybe areas where do you have something like that? Sorry for the long.
Thank you for the question. Be sure that I am not the one to write to the farmers, as you may expect. We were the lab with a consortium of 5 companies to develop the system for the paying agencies. And today, the paying agency have adopted or mimic what we have developed. Some have developed their own stuff, some other have applied. I was told that in Latvia, they will adopt the Send4Cap system. And you will see some results for the Lithuania soon. It was Estonia, I think they adopt the Send4Cap system, I believe. What we can say today is that there have been only experimental implementation of the interaction with the farmer. In Denmark, for instance, the Danish farmer 3 years ago received a letter, not all of them, but it was a part of Denmark, saying, okay, you have not mowed your grassland yet. Please make sure that you mow your grassland within 3 weeks. Otherwise, you have to change your declaration. Otherwise, you will have penalties. And the result of this, let's say, information to the farmer was the fact that all of the farmers either mow their grassland or change their declaration. None of them was penalized. And meaning that actually the farmer, in that case, played the game and took advantage of the information which was provided. Of course, we don't have the full-scale result to reply to your question because it starts in 2023. Therefore, it will be next year that we are at full scale and all farmers will be with letters if they are not compliant with what they say. But what is very important is to know that unlike before, the farmers are allowed to change their declaration. It would be like a student who, instead of failing to an exam, if the professor say you are probably not at the right level to pass the exams, he could cancel his registration to this course. And this is what happened with the farmer. If he feels that he will not do what he claimed to do, he can change his declaration and therefore there will be no penalty. And therefore, this is in the interest of the farmer to be, let's say, to pay attention to what is coming from the system. But you are right that there may be some dispute and the farmer are allowed to provide pictures and to prove that the satellite did not do the job. And actually, he mowed his grass, but the satellite was not able to see it for many reasons. Cloud is not the reason because there is SAR, but it could be because there are too many trees and therefore the signal was confused, or maybe there are too many rocks, or maybe the vegetation development was too low. And there are many reasons why the satellite will not see the stuff, but the farmer can provide a proof on his side. And these are geotag picture that can be sent to the paying agency. And of course, all of this rely on the fact that the farming asks for public money. And as this is public money, it is logical that it comply to some expectation that the society expect from them, meaning reducing the impact on climate change, reducing the impact on biodiversity, and so on. And this is part of the Green Deal of the EU, of course. But each country will implement that at different pace, and therefore I don't know exactly what will be the case in your country. There were other questions, no?
Thank you for the answer. But I think the following question is, with such a system deeply ingrained with the policy, you already answered about many of the disputes that might arise. But I think the still issue is with uncertainty, as you said. I think I saw, maybe I interpreted it incorrectly, but one of the classifications for the system algorithms you had was about 80% accurate, right? So it will be logical that in the future there might be many issues. And my question following to that would be, do you plan to somehow use the feedback from the farmers to improve the system? Maybe seeing where the algorithm is not working correctly, or maybe some kind of an, I don't know, adding additional markers for different locations, so on, so the system would work more efficiently down the line.
Yeah, I would say that there are plenty of work to be done once it will be fully operational, and this will be a learning curve. You are fully right that we will learn from the farmer, and obviously what has been decided at the common policy level is the fact that even if there is a parcel that we are not sure, and therefore this could be a dispute or an ambiguity because our detection confidence is very low, the farmer claimed that this was not correct. In this case, we will, not we, but the paying agency will compute the impact. And if it's below a certain amount of money, they will not dispute. The commission will pay because the farmer will have the advantage, I would say. If it comes to a larger amount of money, then there will be a visit on the ground. This is the way it will work. Therefore, we will not discuss for 200 euro, but if it comes to large amount of money, then there will be a visit if there is a dispute. But you are right that this visit cannot concern 15% of the farmer. It should concern 1 or 2% of the farmer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi. Maybe you can comment possibility to detect grazing activity in the parcel, and is there possibility also detect the high from the moving is like collected or left on the field? Thanks.
You ask if we can detect the height of the grassland. Eh? Is it your question?
Yeah, no. The high is like collected or just left on the field, on the ground.
Okay.
After the mowing.
Oh, you are right. Today in the mowing detection, and there is just a paper out in the remote sensing of environment this week. One of the main confusing factor is the fact that the farmer will not manage the full parcel as a whole. He will graze half of the parcels. He will leave the hay on the parcels, and then collect the hay later on after maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And this disturbs a lot the average of the signal. And there is a room of improvement to subdivide the parcel into management unit. And these are confusing parts. factors. You are fully right. And therefore, if you want to support the farmer to get confused signal, there are many ways to do it. But this will impact only the SAR, not the NDVI. Therefore, you are never sure. Eh? I mean, you are saying that one or the other signal will be probably reliable. Any other question?
I have a question, yeah. So I guess most of the questions are practical questions, and mine is, since the Sentinel-1B has been unavailable since December, how have you accounted for the 12-day coherence in your models? Because a lot of the models that you presented are very sensitive to the interferometric coherence, and we know that with 12 days, it gets harder to model either harvest predictions or, harvest detection and some of the other things. So how have you accounted for this in your models? And moving forward, what would you suggest is the general approach to model, given the fact that satellite data might be a problem, whether satellite breakdown or some other issues? Like, how do we account for these? So that's my first question.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, the Sentinel program was so successful, thanks to ESA, that actually we developed system which does not allow to have a breakdown. Therefore, today we are in very bad position. There will be a launch of Sentinel-1C in the spring next year. Therefore, for next year, it won't be good. Today, what we can show is the coherence at 12 days is still working. It's not working. We have not tested in many countries. We have not tested for the mowing detection. We tested for the harvest detection. There are ongoing activities now to see what is the impact of the Sentinel-1B breakdown for the mowing detection. You are fully right that this should not be the case, and this is why we have been looking at other satellite sources like RadarSat constellation, Tandem-X, and so on. But this won't be a good solution for the whole of Europe. Therefore, my recommendation to the Commission and to ESA, but this is under discussion, is to have like the meteorological satellite. You need to have an extra satellite in orbit that you can switch on anytime. You know, for the meteor satellite, there is a spare satellite that you can turn out within 1 hour. You know, if the Meteosat second generation fell down, no problem, there is another one. And therefore, we need to build the resilience of the observation capability if we want to support policy for good. But we are not there yet. Eh? It's still upon decision.
Okay, thank you. My second question is about the radiative transfer modeling. I think it's interesting how you can relate the plant's characteristics or features to the canopy reflectance. And I'm wondering if you've explored any of these causal relationships also between actual farming practices. So, for example, fertilizer application and the relation between that and NDVI. Because maybe in the end, the one useful part of these metrics for farmers is if I want to get a high NDVI, then maybe a farmer is, what do I do to increase my crop health in that sense? So have you explored any the causal relationship between physical farming practices and these metrics and how does that look like?
Yeah, it's not NDVI that we can look. You are fully right that from the farmer perspective, what is important to know is to save fertilizer. This is costly. This is a source of emission, NOx and so on. And therefore, you want to reduce the nitrogen fertilization, but still to optimize your yield. To do so, actually, there are various development which has been implemented by private companies. We did some as well. we use what we call the NNI, the Nutrition Nitrogen Index, which tells the farmer that if he puts too much or not enough nitrogen. This is a way you can also look at the organic field. You can detect them easily because they are less fertilizer. And today, actually, this is the most operational advice system for farmers. This is nitrogen fertilization. But to do that, you rely on chlorophyll content. You remember this morning the biophysical variable related to canopy chlorophyll content. This is very much linked to the nitrogen which is absorbed by the leaf. And therefore, this is a good indication of the need of fertilization. Therefore, this is running. I will not go into this level of application today, but I am pleased that you asked the question because this is one of the farmer application today. It's difficult to validate that, but this is what the private companies said. But as scientists, we can say that there is a reason why it works. There is another question about photovoltaic panels over crops to reduce evapotranspiration, I suppose. And therefore, how do we manage the photovoltaic panels if you are grazing, in particular, with sheep below the panels? This is common practice in some places. For sure, you won't be able to detect anything with satellite, and you will detect your panels. Therefore, this will be the case where there will be new system to be put in place to verify that the farmer declared such a field. I'm not sure how this kind of field are considered in the Common Agriculture Policy. I don't know if you can claim subsidies for that. All right, I propose, as we have only 15 minutes to go, we won't go into the full set of slides that I provide, but I would like to make sure that we go to the yield level for sure. And therefore, how do we estimate the yield from biophysical variables? And today, the start of the art is still weak. This is really the place where there is a lot of room for improvement and a lot of research activity. Currently, from a high resolution, it's still under development. What is operational is derived from MODIS typically, and maybe soon from Sentinel-3. But this signal, which provides a yield estimate, will not capture a crop-specific signal. It captures the landscape signal, agricultural landscape, combining crops. Of course, in landscape, which are very simple, where there is one or two crops, it works fine because there is still a crop-specific signal. But otherwise, you have a crop condition monitoring, which is in place, and this does not tell about the yield directly, but tell you about the anomalies. I will show you some example. From the Copernicus Sentinel missions, we can say that there are a lot of new opportunities, but also challenges, because today in situ data, which are EO compatible, they are very scarce, very rare. I mean, it's not very common to have yield information at a scale which is compatible with the satellite. Therefore, there are three ways to work on this, either empirical regression or semi-empirical model, like the light use efficiency concept that I just introduced when I mentioned the biomass and the FFR. That is what we call the Montes-based model, or mechanistic crop growth modeling and EO-derived variables assimilation. Since the early 18th, people have shown that NDVI, computed or cumulated for 5 weeks period, for instance, allow to explain the wheat yield variation. even to some 88% of explanation, which was actually quite high. But this is very empirical, this is very locally based. Most recently, some people show that the maximum NDVI derived from MODIS can be actually a good estimate of winter wheat yield. This was the case in Ukraine in very simple landscape. Some other has shown that you need to adjust your NDVI curve according to the growing degree days. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but the time scale can be based on Julian day, 1st of January, 2nd of January, and so on, just the civil calendar. Or you can also cumulate the temperature, which is above a certain threshold. We know that below 4 degrees, the crop will not grow. Therefore, we will accumulate the number of degrees above 4 degrees. And this will give you another time scale, which is the time scale of accumulation of growing degree days. And this allows you to develop your NDVI profile in a different way and to have different metrics, which are related to the yield. Most recently, green chlorophyll vegetation index or maximum LAI have been shown to be quite related to the yield. But all are empirical regression, which are very local and therefore with a limited applicability. They are effective and simple. It works for a given area where it's well calibrated and if the season is just a normal season. Here is an example. We run an experiment in Mali where you have 5 levels of fertilization here. You see the square, there is 5 levels of fertilization and then a square without any fertilization. And then we can monitor this over the season. And of course, this was worldview time series, was luxury time series because it's costly, 2 meter resolution. And you see the growing season here. And you can see that from different parcels, you have different kind of growing season with different variability. And in this sorghum field, where you have the fertilization experiment, you have, of course, a large standard deviation because of the different level of fertilization. And you can see that there is a very strong reply, a very strong response spectrally to the fertilization and therefore to the yield. And you can show that actually the above ground biomass measured on the ground is quite correlated to the yield for the cotton, for the maize, for the millet, and less for the sorghum. Meaning that if you capture the above ground biomass, you can predict the yield. This was both biophysical variable measured on the ground. But of course, when it comes to the remote sensing, you can detect the peak of leaf area index, because there is no saturation unlike in DVI, the peak of LAI, which allow you more or less, we can say, to predict some yield. But this is only less than 70% of explanation of the variability of the yield for the 2 main crop here. It works better for millet, but I mean, the regression distribution of corn is not very strong. And for sorghum, it's rather weak. Therefore, it seems that we can find some reliable proxy, but still, you see there are far too few points, and this needs to be developed. The cost of in situ data collection is probably the bottleneck of this evolution. In Europe, the challenge is not only the yield estimation, but also the forecast. Therefore, what you want to do is to forecast in advance the expected yield. And you can do that from historical yield plus the cumulative FA-par. And if you combine the cumulative FA-par plus the historical yield data, for instance, the trend of the yield will explain already part of the yield variation. Then you have to aggregate that not at the parcel level, but at the nuts tree level, which is an administrative level below the region. Then you have a compensation of the error, and you can have that kind of correlation, which is very, very good. You predict the yield with 85%, 82% of the variability, which is explained by your forecast. You can do that at parcel level. This doesn't work. But when you aggregate, actually the overestimation and the underestimation are combined and you reduce your error. Therefore, we can say that national scale is easy. NUTS 2, it's still quite feasible. NUTS 3 is challenging, and parcel level is underdeveloped. Last but not least, when you quit the empirical approach and you want to do it more physically based, you can use a crop growth model, which will mimic, thanks to the rainfall, the temperature, the properties of the soil, you can develop a model which grows and where you can predict the growth of the vegetation. And this model can be informed by information coming from the satellite. And therefore, you can have a forcing strategy where your satellite provide values that you force into your crop growth model. And therefore, you may have LAI value that you force your model to take in, and therefore your model will follow your observation. Or the other way is to recalibrate your model based on the observation that you get from the satellite. And you know that your satellite is not perfect, therefore you don't want to force your model. You want to combine the knowledge from your model with the one coming from the satellite. And therefore you want to minimize the discrepancy between the prediction of the model and the observation from the satellite. And by minimizing these two values for the same variables, which can be the LAI, for instance, you will fine-tune parameters which minimize this difference between the observation from the satellite and the prediction from the model. And to do that, actually, you have to find out what are the calibration which are needed and what are the parameters you want to play with. Therefore, here is a parameter that we can play with. This is the initial biomass after winter for the winter wheat in Belgium, for instance. Therefore, you know that at the end of the winter, you have some vegetation development, but you don't know which one is at that stage. And therefore, you can play with variables which allow you to get the right LAI profile during the summer. I mean, the right LAI profile is a profile corresponding to the one that you observe. Same, another parameter is the length of the leaf lifespan, and therefore you can increase the duration of the leaf, and this allows you to fit the LAI curve observed by the satellite. Therefore, you have a two-dimension solution, and by default, you have this kind of value, the Rofos value. This is a default one used by the model, but the LAI curve, it's running on its own, the LAI curve tells you that your optimum for these two parameters should be there. Therefore, you see that the default value is not that correct, and you better use a different value for these two parameters. And it can be very far from the default value, like in 25 or in 29. While in 27, we are not very far, and the default value is close to what was observed, for sure, for the span. And then when you play that, you can look at the improvement taken by the Earth observation information. And therefore, the Worforce default value, Worforce is a very sophisticated model. The Worforce default value was providing that kind of yield prediction. And this was the kind of performance. The default was the line, and the distribution was the one you predict by Worforce. And you see that you may be off in many cases. And when you add to Worforce the remote distance variable, then you solve the problem, and the Worforce estimation assimilating the Earth observation match the observation, and this was very nice for 23. This was good for 24, but we were off for 26. And we were good for 29, not so good for 27. Therefore, today we show that assimilation in crop growth model improves the solution in most cases, but not in all cases. Therefore, there is a lot of work and research activity to take place for that point. I believe I need to stop here. Maybe I will go straight to the conclusion. This was my last slide for the section 5. Section 6 was about the open source toolbox. I already explained you this toolbox by explaining the result for the CEN4CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy. But here you will find more explanation, and more specifically, the challenge related to large-scale mapping, which is maybe not of interest for many of you. But when it comes to national scale or European scale, you have new challenges related to the heterogeneity of observation density, heterogeneity of valid observation, agroclimatic gradients, and all these challenges has been solved in the open source system that I will just introduce in a second now. I will not go into detail, but this is a kind of animation which are very nice. And I will go straight, not to the challenge, but here is the system which is running. Automatically, you get the Lee area index obtained as the satellite observe the area. And this is, of course, obvious. This is running on its own in real time. And of course, this is the kind of observation you can have. And then I will not go through into the different method of classification, but most of the system are using random forest or artificial intelligence, like neuronal network. And I wanted just to show this kind of application. When it comes to processing and you insert in situ data, then you can run from this open source nationwide crop type map. And this can be quite accurate if you have the declaration from the farmer to train your system. It can be also quite accurate if you have a large scale in situ data collection, as we did in 2016 in Ukraine. And this is the track over Ukraine. It took several weeks, of course, to collect the data, but then you have very nice information to process. And then I want to conclude. This one was the Lithuania result, and therefore this is a Lithuania nationwide crop time mapping using CEN4CAP, and you see that for the overall accuracy is quite reasonable, 88%, 88 also for 2020. And for 9 crops, the performance was quite high with a F1 score, which was above 8.8, and this corresponds to 92% of the area. But for many crops, it was very bad. But it does not matter too much because it covers a very small area. I will not go through this detail. This is a validation. These are information that you are probably fully aware of. but I wanted to put it there to make sure that you do a good job. And I skipped the benchmarking result for Lithuania, but you have seen them probably. And I wanted just to conclude here. The Senforstat is the latest version of this open source toolbox. Sentinel-2 Agree was the precursor of Senforstat, and Sentinel-2 Agree is fully available today. You can download. There are training materials, there are many materials to fully understand what is behind. The Sen4Cap is still operational, but this is object-based. Sentinel-2 Agree is pixel-based, is operational, but will be replaced by Sen4Stat over the summer. Sen4Cap is object-based, meaning that you need the parcel to be able to use Sen4Cap, for the Common Agriculture Policy. Sen4Stat is pixel-based and do the same job, Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, while Sentinel-2 Agree was using only Sentinel-2 as the name mentioned. Therefore, this is the Sentinel-2 Agree. If you want to play with this system, please feel free to get the software to run it. It will run on its own if you set up the system in a Linux environment. This is a big constraint. This has to be run on Linux environment because this is more stable. Sen2 Agree is a precursor of Sen4Stat, and the big change with Sen4Stat is the fact that Sentinel-1 is included and the yield prediction is included. For that, now I want to conclude. Cloud computing facilities change completely what we can do, and today we can develop operational service for sure. The potential is fully outstanding, and this is why this is very nice to have people like you to be trained, because there is a lot to be done, and the synergistic use of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 is just at the beginning. And what we've foreseen clearly is a full-scale annual cropland mapping, crop-specific crop growth monitoring, yield and production estimate are really not far from being fully operational. But we need application to develop the learning curve to do the job at the level which is required. And what is very nice is the fact that today, thanks to the cloud infrastructure, we can do it in real time to make sure that we are providing information in a timely manner to the right person to take the right decision. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I am still available, but I can fully understand that you want to run to your lunch, and I will leave you with the reference here, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Pierre, for all your knowledge this morning. Does anybody have any question? Or I suppose if you do, they can still write to you later, right?
That's right.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So we can do like this. Do you want to talk about this afternoon, or shall I do it?
Sorry?
Do you want to talk about what's going to happen this afternoon, or shall I do it?
I already mentioned it, but I can do it this afternoon. You will have Fabrizio Ramonio to introduce you to the use of SNAP toolbox to derive from Sentinel-2 leaf area index. This is what we call green area index in my talk here, but this is the same variables. And I hope you got the point. And the purpose is to derive time series of green area index over an agricultural landscape. And then in the second part with the Jupyter Notebook, this will be done on Snap, allowing you to do it on your own. And then the Jupyter Notebook, which is a pre-coded application, you will be running a quality control of this leaf area index information to see if there is no outlier, and then to compute some statistic over the landscape to see how the crop behave and to understand what are the intrafield variability using this leave area index information. Amalia, feel free to give them more information.
I think you explained it very well.
You? No more questions?
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think so. Thanks a lot, Pierre. We were very lucky to have you with us today. And we look forward to this afternoon with Fabrizio and with Baptiste from your team.